Hi, my name is Jaycee, and I'm going to be reading to you today Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History. And this book is by Vashti Harrison. So let's see who Vashti is. This is Vashti. Vashti is an artist and filmmaker with a passion for storytelling. She went to school in California and snuck into classes around animation and illustration classes to learn from Disney and DreamWorks professionals. There, she rekindled a love for drawing and painting, and now she uses her love of both film and illustration to craft beautiful stories for children. So, when we are reading, keep a lookout for all of the beautiful drawings that Vashti's done. But let's get going. So, the first leader that we are going to talk about today is Zora Neale Hurston. Zora was born in 1891, and she was a writer, a folklorist, and an anthropologist. And if you didn't know, an anthropologist is somebody who studies the behavior of humans. Zora's unique upbringing led her down a path of storytelling and creativity. She was raised in Eatonville, a historic town in northern Florida. Eatonville was special because in 1886 it became the first self governed all Black city in America. It was an idyllic, nurturing environment that fostered an extreme sense of pride in its culture and traditions. It sounds like an amazing community. As a young woman, Zora worked a number of jobs and saved up enough money to enroll at Howard University in 1918. There, she published her very first story. By 1925, Zora had won awards for writing and had caught the attention of very prominent Black authors living in Harlem. Harlem is in New York. That year, she moved to New York and continued her undergraduate degree as the very first Black student at the all women's Barnard College. She worked alongside very famous creators, including Langston Hughes and Alan Locke, who were also involved in the Black artistic movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. Zora was celebrated as a writer who personified the movement and was given the nickname Queen of the Renaissance. Zora recognized the need to record African American stories, and she celebrated them long before others realized how important they would be. Her famous works include her masterpiece, Their Eyes Were Watching God, a novel inspired by her Eatonville past. In Mules and Men, her published collection of stories from North Florida, she tracked and recorded the tales that built up the very rich culture of the African American South. Tell My Horse was the result of years of research and study of folklore and religion in Jamaica and Haiti. Upon her passing, the famous writer Alice Walker called her a genius of the South. This is Zora. Her nickname was the Queen of the Harlem Renaissance. Who's next? Ooh, Alice Ball. Alice Ball was born in 1892, and Alice was a chemist and a medical researcher. Science. Both Alice's mother and grandfather were photographers, and as a child, she developed an interest in chemicals used in photography. She went to college in her hometown of Seattle and earned not one but two degrees in pharmaceutical chemistry and pharmacy. What an accomplishment for a young woman. At the time, most of the African American population in the city was employed in service professions, such as cleaning homes or making food, for example. But Alice defied expectations and her circumstances by seeking an education and career in science. In 1915, Alice became the very first woman and the first African American to graduate with a master's degree from the University of Hawaii. While working on her thesis, she developed what would become the leading treatment for leprosy. a very serious incurable disease. She had found a way for oil from the seed of the cholmugra tree to be absorbed in the bloodstream. This treatment became the primary method that would be used until the 1940s. But for a long time, no one knew Alice was the inventor. Less than 2 years after this discovery, Alice died, and the director of her program took credit for her findings. Alice's method became known as the Dean method. It wasn't until the 1970s that historians unearthed the truth and worked to ensure that Alice got credit for her important discovery. On February 2000, the University of Hawaii recognized her for her work and dedicated a plaque to her on the only cholmugra tree in the school's campus. That day, the Lieutenant Government of Hawaii declared February 29th Alice Ball Day. And this would be Alice in front of the tree with her special plaque. It says the type of oil of the cholmugra tree and her name. Ooh. Next up, we have Bessie Coleman. Bessie was a pilot, and she was born in 1892. Bessie grew up in a small segregated town in Texas. At home with her three younger siblings, she had a lot of responsibilities. She washed clothes by hand, fetched cleaning water, on top of walking 4 miles to school and back every day. Bessie knew that one day she would leave her small town. In 1950, she moved to Chicago to live with her older brothers. Returning from World War I, they told her all about France and how the women there could fly planes. Unlike the women in America, they couldn't do that. And this got Bessie very curious, furiously curious. She applied to every aviation school in America she could find, but was denied entry. No one at any of these schools thought a girl could fly. Bessie wanted to prove them wrong. In 1920, she moved to France where she could finally learn aviation. She was so gifted, she graduated from the 10-month flight school in only 7 months. So in 1921, Bessie became the very first African American woman in the world to receive her pilot's license. She specialized in stunt flying, parachuting, and aerial tricks. So that means she took her plane and would fly tricks in the sky. After returning home to the United States, Bessie flew for huge crowds. She was very popular among both white and Black Americans and stood up against segregation and discrimination whenever she could. She hoped to open up her own flight school to teach other girls of color how to fly. Unfortunately, during a test flight in 1926, a mechanical issue caused her plane to crash. Bessie passed away, but her legacy lives on. In 1977, the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club opened in Chicago to support women of all races to reach their dreams of flying. And Bessie says, I made up my mind to try. I tried and I was successful. So this is a reminder to keep on going. Even when somebody tells you you can't do anything, you can. And always stand up for yourself and others. Ooh, Katherine Johnson. Katherine Johnson was born in 1918, and Katherine was a NASA mathematician. And if you don't know, NASA is our space exploration. Judging by the way Katherine took to math, you would think it was her first language. As a child, she counted everything. She skipped 7 grades and graduated ahead of her older siblings. As a young woman, she became a math teacher, but her mentor at the University of West Virginia encouraged her to pursue a career as a research mathematician. In 1953, Katherine got her chance. NASA's Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia had recently opened a lab that hired African American mathematicians. In a time before there were digital calculators, cell phones, or computer machines, the women and men who performed computations were called computers. So, interesting. people used to call themselves computers before we had the electronics that we do today. Catherine's first assignment was to the Flight Research Division. The United States was in the middle of the space race, a period of time in the 1950s and 60s when America and Russia were competing for technological advancement in spaceflight. So, America and Russia were in a competition to see who could get into space. Imagine the Earth is rotating, and the top goal was to get a man on the moon. Catherine was one of the people who helped make it happen. Oh my gosh. Her job was to calculate the flight path for the first mission in space. So the Earth is rotating, the moon is evolving, and a rocket has to follow a very, very specific path and trajectory in order to reach its moving target. That's a lot of math. Even when mechanical computers were introduced, Catherine was still crucial. She was so important. She continued computing at NASA until her retirement in 1986, and her work influenced every major space program up to that point. During the Friendship 7 mission in 1962, John Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth, refused to launch without verification that Catherine herself had double-checked the math. Catherine was a queen. In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded Catherine the Presidential Medal of Honor of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. That is incredible. All right, who's up next? Shirley Chisholm. So Shirley was born in 1924, and she was a teacher, a politician, and an activist. Shirley was born in Brooklyn, New York, but spent 7 years of her childhood in Barbados with her grandmother. When she returned to the United States, she arrived with a new accent and a new sense of boldness, others later described as uniquely Caribbean. In college, she became involved in politics and student organizations. She had very strong opinions and a fiery determination that made people stop and listen. Shirley worked as a teacher in Brooklyn and made a name for herself as a leader and advocate in her neighborhood. She volunteered and consulted at organizations that lifted up the community, including the Bureau of Child Welfare, the Brooklyn Home for Aged Colored People, and the local NAACP. She was very active in local political organizations, as well as the Democratic Women's Workshop, the League of Women Voters, and the Bedford Stuyvesant Political League. She stood up for racial equality and welfare and confronted local politicians. Her outspokenness made her very appealing to the community and very, very intimidating to politicians in power. In 1964, she earned a seat in the New York State Assembly. And in 1968, she became the very first Black woman elected to the U.S. Congress. She made waves when she crossed party lines and stood up to the leaders of her party. She was an independent thinker and was never one to stay in her own lane. In 1972, she announced her run for president, making history as the very first woman and first person of color to bid for a major party nomination. She ultimately lost, but she did achieve her goal of making her party more aware and responsive to the people. Never give up. And her slogan says, "I am the candidate of the people." Peace. Sports. So next up, we have Wilma Rudolph. Wilma was born in 1940, and she was a sprinter. Wilma is one of America's most famous sprinters, but her journey to the finish line was a long one. When she was 4 years old, Wilma contracted polio, for which she was there for no cure at the time. The disease paralyzed her left leg, and she was forced to wear a metal leg brace. Wilma was a little different and got teased a lot. She was small and her sandy hair made her stand out. But Wilma was also so strong. With lots of hard work, determination, and physical therapy, she was walking without a brace by age 12. That's incredible. A year later, she was running faster than all the boys and all the girls in her 8th grade. By middle school, she had joined track and field and was winning every event. When she was only 16 years old, she earned her first Olympic medal at the 1956 Games in Melbourne, Australia. Wow. Only a few years before, she had never even heard of the Olympic Games. But now, Wilma was determined to win gold. In Rome in 1960, she became the very first American woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympics. When she returned home to Clarksville, Tennessee, a parade was given in her honor. But Wilma found out that the organizers planned the event to be segregated. So she refused to participate until they agreed to integrate it. As an American icon, Wilma knew her stance on civil rights and could have an impact. She didn't let the fact that she was so young stop her. How amazing that one brave voice can make a difference. Wilma later became a teacher and a coach, and in 1981, she started the Wilma Rudolph Foundation to support young athletes. Wilma was so determined, and she did what she wanted to do. All right. And our last leader is Julia Dash. Julia was born in 1952, and she is a filmmaker. It seems that Julia always knew she wanted to be a filmmaker, but her journey began with some luck. As a teen, she participated in a film workshop at the Studio Museum in Harlem. She thought it was for still photography, but to her surprise, it was for motion pictures, and the medium just stuck. She went on to study film in college, did a 2-year fellowship at the American Film Institute, and then got her Master of Fine Arts degree at the University of California, Los Angeles. During her time at UCLA, she joined a new generation of Black students in the directing program. All of them were fueled by the love of cinema and a drive to make new, inclusive work. They were known as the filmmakers of the LA Rebellion. They all collaborated and helped each other out. Julie was the best at doing hair and makeup. In 1991, Julie made her very first length film, Daughters of the Dust, about a family from the Gulag Geechee community, descendants of African slaves living in the low country region of North Carolina and Georgia's eastern coast. The film is a lyrical family drama centering on 3 generations of women and their religious and traditional preparations for a major move. This was the first film by an African American woman to receive a general theatrical release in the United States. In 2004, the Library of Congress placed The Daughters of the Dust on the National Film Registry, a list of distinguished films preserved as a national treasures. Julie's passion for film is truly remarkable. She participated in many distinguished programs, has been nominated for countless awards and honors, and is an alumna of the best film programs in the country. In an industry dominated by men, she was often the first wherever she went, but she will not be the last. And those are a couple of very bold, strong women in Black history that have made incredible changes to our world and country today. So, reminder, no matter what you want to put your mind to, you can do it. Don't let anything stop you. And just because you're one person, you can make changes and be incredible in the world. Thanks for listening.